Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Dare Okoudjou, founder and CEO of MFS Africa. MFS Africa is a pan-African FinTech company that develops innovative value-added services for mobile wallets. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stacey.
How's the last week, couple of months been?
Oh, pretty good. As you know, the cold here in Johannesburg was something in July. But I spent this week trying to get ready to go on leave. So I look forward to that. I'll be off next week. So looking forward to reading some books.
Well deserved. Dara, let's hop right in. I'm really eager to learn more about your career and ultimately what led you to build MFS Africa.
Sure. So, as you may know, Stacey, I'm from Benin, in West Africa, born and raised there. I left Benin in '94, initially to go to Morocco. I spent 2 years there. And ultimately, I went to France to study engineering, telecom engineering. So I graduated as a telecom engineer in '99. But the year before I graduated in '98, I had my first startup experience. I joined a startup in the US, in New York, where we were trying to build ADSL modems. And that was, I had a really, really technical job of simulating transmission channels and all this kind of good stuff. And it was my real first introduction to work, to career, if you like. And that was good in the sense that it made it clear to me that I prefer the business side of things than the deep technical. The why was important to me. Why did we need to build ADSL modems? What problem was that going to solve, and why was that important? Anyway, learning from that, I went back to France, graduated in '99, and I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, more in the quest to be involved more in business side of things and solving problems at business level rather than writing code, which I enjoyed very much as well back then. PwC, consulting is kind of the place for people who don't know what they want to do, and I was one of them. So you cannot go with the flow, and I went with the flow, learned about many things, learned to be a professional. I would say it was a great school, but slowly over the years, the urge to come back to Africa and B, have a meaningful impact on bettering lives across the continent was just with me and won't go away. So I eventually got there, joined MTN in Johannesburg via business school, and I landed in South Africa in 2006 to work with MTN Group, and spent 3 years with the group. Fantastic years again. South Africa, you remember the lead up to the 2010 World Cup was the place to be. It was just absolutely phenomenal, and I enjoy every bit of it. But again, as MTN was growing and I was growing with it, I was the last 2.5 years with MTN, I was pretty much focused on driving what is now MTN Mobile Money. So I was responsible for the group to roll this out. So it was very, very early days of mobile money. And as I was doing this, I couldn't stop thinking about, what else could be. And yes, we were building this for MTN, and I couldn't help thinking that, what will it be if we can connect all of them together? If we can connect it to the one that Orange was building, that Vodafone was building, and so on and so forth. So that eventually set me on the path to start MFS Africa, and it was just a quest of replicating something that I've seen firsthand happening in the telecommunication world, which is just to, connect networks in one giant network of networks, which today makes us all take for granted that, I can pick up my phone here in Johannesburg and call someone in Bangladesh or Peru or Djibouti. And so it was like, can we do the same with money? And that's how I started MFS Africa, and been trying since.
That's awesome. You've gone between startups and corporates. How do you know the startup world is for you?
I think it's, first of all, these days, I would say the lines becoming blurrer and blurrer between what you will call startup and corporate, right? You have startup like literally 5 people, and you have startup like MFS Africa with like 165 people, and you have startup, you know, even bigger ones, right? But ultimately, I think it's about risk appetite. I think a little bit, your ability to live on the edge. Um, but stage matters a lot. I think the stage of the startup that we're talking about. So to start something is completely different. Like start from zero, and that's kind of founder. And there's so much being said and written, and so much literature about the psychology of founders, right? So I'm not talking about that. But to join, if you're gonna decide to join a team of 4 or 5 people, I think the story and who those people are matters a lot. It's really it's so small that it doesn't really matter what your job is going to be. What would be probably more important is, can you actually work with those 4 or 5 people, and is what they're trying to build something that resonates deeply with you. Um, as the company progresses, I think that becomes slightly less important, although it continues to be very, very important. But I think as the company grow and become more stable and have system and processes, you are just joining a smaller company. And I think at that point, the upside becomes important. Probably the purpose of the company is also very important. I think the nature and who the founder is still continue to play a big role, but normally that diminish as thing goes. I don't know if people join, Google today because of Sergey, who are no longer there, right? So at some point, that hopefully that goes away, and it's more about the purpose of the company and what kind of environment they can offer, what kind of culture they have. I think, and then it becomes just comparing companies, not so much startup to corporate.
Let's hone in on your experience. What made you feel like it was the right move?
I think I was always a bit itchy, I think. And I have to say, I was pretty bad corporate guy. I was, I was always crossing lanes. I couldn't just stay. Corporate has so many unspoken rules, and I'm kind of a bit revolutionary. So I just want to do what I want to do.
I love it.
From that point of view, I don't think I would have lasted in corporate anyway. But on the other side, I think I always had this urge to do something meaningful. For me, it was always about uh, make the life we live in count. And we live in a continent. We are from a continent that has so much more to build and so much more to bring prosperity. And that was constantly with me from university days through all my experiences. So I was fortunate enough to have, had the exposure, working in good places, went to good schools, and so when the opportunity came to actually put all this to test, to test my resolve to actually make a meaningful impact on the lives of Africa, and I thought that was a blessing. So I embraced it. So it wasn't an agonizing question for me at all. It seemed natural.
You briefly touched on the psychology behind entrepreneurs. You took the leap and left corporate to build your own business. When is it right to stay corporate, and when is it right to take that risk and build your own business?
I think so. One thing that we have to keep in mind is, like, if it's about money, actually, if you are talented, corporate is a pretty good option.
Okay.
Because, you can, I'll say, really, really good caliber people can do a life in corporate and will end up with a net worth of $5 million plus. And along the way, they will go on holidays and they will put their kids through good schools and they will enjoy life. That if you're good, the skill gap, the skill shortage is so big in Africa that actually you can do that. So I think if it's about money, actually starting a business is a bad idea, because the probability, right, the expected output. So how much money you want times the probability of getting it. if you do that math, corporate is better, I think. Now, so it has to be about something
Okay.
else. I think it has to be bigger. It has to be something more deeper. It has to be something that you're kind of passionate about, or really an opportunity that only you can take, something like that. And most people I see around me, it's more the former. Is people who are deeply passionate about a problem, people who
Yeah.
are deeply, in love with something, people who just burning to do that thing that they're starting. And that is actually what carries you through the difficult moment, I think. And as it goes along the way, I think also, as I explained earlier, um, the different stages. And I do think that, we have also this myth of starting, but we've seen many, many examples of companies that actually the person who finishes is not the person who started it. And we have to
Yeah.
keep that in mind. So there are points where, the CEO of the company may not be the founder, or the founder is not the right person
Yeah.
to lead the company. So there is also that opportunity. And I think sometimes we look a little bit down on that, or we don't make it as explicit that you can come from corporates and take leadership or play a leading role in what was a startup and growing startup. And actually, we're coming to an age in Africa where there are quite a number of those companies that can use, steadier hands, I would say, than founder hands sometimes, to take the company into another. So one thing is to start, but another thing is to join at some point and still make a meaningful impact. And I don't think one is better than the other, and the founder should be more celebrated than executives who can just grow businesses.
So if a friend came to you, they have the passion, they're like, I am really excited to start this business. This is why, this is the impact I want to make across Africa. What else would you recommend they have in place before going ahead and starting this business? Whether that's financially, skill set, what would you recommend?
First, and I said this before, I think, brilliance is hygiene factor. This thing is
Mm.
so hard that you need to be able to, you need to be smart. Like, and when I say smart, it's not like necessarily top of your class and all that, but
Mm.
just ability to work through really complex things quickly when it requires rational thinking. So that has to be, if you don't have it yourself, you need to surround yourself with people. So the number one is to check, can you do that? Can you build a team? Because the skills that you're gonna need along the way, it's almost impossible for one person to have all those things. Actually, I would say it's
Yeah.
impossible. So the first question is, okay, can this person just think through the stuff that we're talking about? Can you build a team around you? Can you bring people along? Can you know can you do that? Do you have the humility to lead? Then the grit will be important,
Yeah.
because maybe it happens
It's not
elsewhere, but
easy.
well, it's most importantly, it's like plan A never works. I never said
Yeah.
it. So whatever you're
Probably
telling
not
me,
even plan B.
whatever you're telling me is your plan, I know it's not going to work. I know, because I never said it. But can you go to plan C? Can you go to plan D
Yeah.
if you have to? And that is the part that people really underestimate, that actually it's the grit carries you through, because it gets really, really messy and you're like in deep water. And
Mm.
most people, I think Ben Horry says this, most people, it's inhuman the kind of mental pressure that founders, entrepreneurs have put themselves through. And most human will will not take it, and they're right not to take it. I'm not. We mustn't build this kind of image of, no, you're too weak. No, it's just too much for people.
Yeah.
And what carries you through again is your ability to build a system around you, to bring people with you. So if you are too solitary, I think it gets even harder. And that goes back to the ability to build a team that I mentioned first. So I'll say, brilliance, humility to lead and build a team, and grit to push through.
I love it. Thanks, Dare. When we were discussing whether to stay corporate or start your own business, you mentioned the talent gap in Africa. In a market like Europe, there is talent for every stage of the business you're in, whether that's pre-seed building phase to rapidly scaling. How do you recommend businesses hire pre-revenue in Africa? And then do you keep the same people in those seats when the business is growing rapidly?
That's a great question. Look, I think pre-revenue, as I mentioned, it has to be really the story and the people. So, you have nothing else to offer, and that's kind of what people make the judgment on. Uh, as you progress, it becomes the business grow and people grow also, and people change, and the job changes. And as you mentioned, in Europe, in the US, in other places where the ecosystem has gone through so many layers, there is indeed people for every stage. So, if you need a chief commercial officer who can take your business from, I don't know, $100,000 to $1 million in revenue, well, there are 10 people who have done that before you can hire. Uh,
Yeah.
you don't kind of get that luxury in Africa. So we need people to scale more than elsewhere. So you need the same person, who has done that from zero to $100,000 to still be able to do the 100 to 1 million. And that's not always possible. Uh,
Yeah.
do you keep the same people? Sometimes, yes. And in Africa, I think we do more than elsewhere, I would believe. But do you have to? I would say no. Because sometimes it's really, really, the job is really different. It could see, including the job of the CEO, as I was mentioning earlier.
Mm.
The job, my job 5 years ago is very different from my job now. And so I have to change to be able to do this job now. But some people can't or don't want to change. I know people who really enjoy that phase of from 0 to 100, which is the
Yeah.
chaos phase, which is we just in one garage and everything, and they truly enjoy that. And why do you want to kind of rob them of that and force them to in a phase that maybe they don't enjoy from 1 million to 10 million, right? So it should be okay that people want to go around and do another startup that is also from coming from 0 to 100. But ultimately, in the past, I would say we didn't have so much of that luxury because the market was so small. But as the last 10 years, with all these startups, all the buzz around tech in general in Africa, I think that would be one of the net positive. The net positive is like there's a lot of people and more people on the market who are fit for different stages of startups, and it will make the life of founders that are coming now a little bit easier than I was where our lives were. And then you have to obviously look more and more, toward corporate to say, look, as company like ours, MFS Africa, is coming to age and growing and becoming more and more established. Obviously, we become a strong competitor to talent in corporate, especially when those people who don't want to be a number, wants meaning and purposes, wants simpler culture, wants flexibility.
Yeah.
Company like ours can offer more of that. So we have now a pool that you can play with, and even if you are really, really a risky person, we get into a space where it's not that risky.
Yeah.
So that I would say, look, you have to recognize that people can change with the job, but people may not be able to or may not want to. So you have to recognize that whether you keep the same people or you change the people as your company grows.
Okay, then what's the difference between deep context and global competitiveness when you're hiring for a Pan-African country?
Oh, that's the art part of entrepreneurship. I think it's such a it's such a delicate balance,
Yeah.
but it's important. I think for you have to actually have an element of both, and you may not have it right at the beginning. So you may
Mm.
hire someone with maybe little context, deep expertise, global exposure, but very quickly you have to have in place the framework to give them the context, right? And but sometimes you do the opposite, where you take people with the context, and they can learn the skills.
Yeah.
But I think as a company, for sure, MFS Africa, we want both. We don't feel like we have to choose because we believe both are extremely important. You cannot tell me really that you wanna move hundreds of millions of Africans toward prosperity if you don't know what life looks like in
Yeah.
Conakry. Yeah? If you never walk the streets of Kampala, if you have no idea what happened on the border between Congo and Zambia, if you don't know the history of an empire. So there are aspects of these things that you cannot be shallow about. That's context. And what you can do will eventually be limited by your lack of context if you don't work on that. But at the same time, context alone will not write line of codes. Context alone will not create marketing. Context alone will not, create and deliver a great sales pipeline. So you do need the skills. But we as MFS Africa, we don't choose between the two. We believe we need both, and we always try to build both into people.
So I've spoken to a couple businesses that are looking at expanding across Africa with no feet on the ground or not even entering the country doing research on the ground before launching. What are your thoughts on that?
Then they know something I don't know. It's very difficult. You see the thing. I mean, again, it depends, right? So whether you're doing B2B or B2C is already very different, right? So
Yeah.
whether you're selling just to government or you're selling not to government. So it will depend on what it is that your business is. But I would say if your business ultimately uh, somehow will require consumers to do something slightly differently for your business to be successful, whether you're working directly with those consumers or you're working with other businesses, but your success depends on consumers' behavior, it will be very courageous, let me say, to do that.
Dare, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I loved having you on.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Of course, where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
On LinkedIn and on Twitter, my handle is @Okoudjou.
Fantastic. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn @Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.